I'm Wolfgang Muthspiel, and this is Coffee Talk.
Hi everyone, I'm Kim Perlak. I'm the chair of the guitar department at Berklee College of Music, and welcome to another Coffee Talk. As usual, we're joined by our assistant chair, Cheryl Bailey. Hey Cheryl.
How you doing? I actually need to add water to my Nespresso machine, so I'm
Oh, this is bad. Yeah.
Oh, speaking of Coffee Talk,
He's gonna have to make a coffee. And we've got Ian Steed, our senior coordinator here.
Hey all, good morning.
And our guest today is Wolfgang Muthspiel,
hi.
professor in Switzerland.
Yes.
And an alum of here. And we're having extra coffee this morning because last night Wolfgang played in our Mick Goodrick Legacy concert, which went very late and later with the hang. So thanks for waking up to do this.
Yes, you're welcome. It was actually great to wake up because I had this half dream, half awake, half dream recollection of the event.
Yeah.
Sometimes after concerts you go through the whole thing, sometimes again and again and again.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful memories.
Yeah.
From this energy of former students celebrating the master and also kind of totally giving it up to each other and really having this positive wish for the other to fly.
Yeah.
Like a beautiful community.
Yeah. All day in all the days that you've been here, Wolfgang's been here for a few days now, and Julian Lodge joined us, and then a lot of other alums sent their videos, and then a lot of faculty were here hanging with you because it's been a long time since you've seen many of the people, so we got to witness a lot of reunions.
Yes, it was a beautiful moment. And since I had seen Mick the night before, it was such a meaningful occasion to play music. Such a great, because I really, really felt that every performer was playing directly to Mick.
Yeah.
Yes.
So when you gave a class the other day, these things came up, like you can think of someone that you're playing to, you can ways to serve the music so that you can really be in the moment. And I felt a lot of that. You could feel that power in the concert. You were all taking care of each other in this way. And you had sort of the inspiration of Mick and each other to focus on. Um, what do you do in different times when you're trying to get into that space? How do you get there in general in your playing?
Well, I think it's always the same challenge, maybe for every performer, to get away from the status oriented. Am I good enough? Will I deliver? To the joy of creation and the joy of playing and the acceptance and embracing of the moment. And I guess every time you got to go through that challenge. And it's always a rewarding, elating feeling when you go to the flow of the music and go to the moment. Time flows differently than all this policing of your own sound stops. And I think that's a very important quality to develop for any musician. Some young students have that already. They bring that with them, even independent of the level on their instrument. Some people just have that. They have fun making a sound, and they can physically be in that sound, like not only analytically observing it. But since we spend so many hours alone in a room with our instrument, it's super important to develop that some kind of way of really enjoying these hours.
Yeah.
Because practicing is fantastic. It's like a beautiful zone where you can take care of your craft and you can get to know so much about yourself. It's like a meditation in a way. And it should kind of be the opposite of work.
Mm.
I mean, it is work in a way, but it's like work with joy and work with um, kind of your senses have to be triggered. It should be a whole experience, much more than an exercise, you know.
Yeah. When we were working with some students, you were working with some of my students yesterday, you're talking about the difference that you see between practicing and playing. And that's something that Mick was really interested in when I came here. This idea that practicing takes place almost on your left brain, where you're really looking at what you're doing and really trying to figure out things. And then can you really experience what it's like to change to your right brain so that you let things flow? And he has experimenting with drawing and chocolate and drones and all different things that try to shift you over. But how do you work with that when you're developing ideas and then you want to see if you can let go? And
Yeah, generally, I really subscribe to that whole view that practicing and playing are different zones because you don't want to contaminate the playing field with the principles that rule in practicing,
okay,
right? The playing is more like an intuitive, dreamy thing, like also childlike. Like a child plays. When you look at a child, how quickly they set up their game and how quickly they change it to another game, and that's kind of like improvisation to me. And of course, in the practicing, you use all the tools you can. You use your mind. You write down things. You use, recording devices and whatever. And whatever flows from the practicing pool, or maybe the research, into the playing is kind of not up to you.
yeah,
It will come when it should, and some things never come actually.
maybe that's the hard part, is that to give up the control of what comes.
Yes, because if the lick that you practiced comes by itself, it's a very welcome guest. Oh, here it is. Great.
Right.
But if it's like, okay, now next chorus on this bar, I could,
Right.
nah,
It's
it's
gonna
not gonna
work.
sound good,
So you have a background in both classical music and jazz, and you have these beautiful pieces that are solo guitar pieces, and then at different points you'll improvise with them. You'll change the structure. You'll broaden things. And I think that's one thing that's really hard for all of us, is like when you have something you're interpreting and then you want to improvise, keeping that flow and keeping some kind of structure in your mind. How do you do that? How do you let that happen?
Well, I must say that is something that I don't really work at. But I do kind of improvise by myself a lot at home, and I always have. And that's kind of second nature to me, to make up something by myself. That's even much easier to me than playing on a tune. It's much easier to me than playing with somebody else. That's the easiest for me. Because anything that comes out is okay for me.
Right.
Really anything.
Yeah.
Because I kind of have a sound that I like, or I can make the sound I want. And then I really accept whatever it is. And actually, there's nothing more valuable or less valuable. The triad can be as killing as the most complex cluster.
True.
It's like whatever comes is okay. So like when I play these written pieces, and I have the feeling that we have had a certain stretch of a certain energy, and we're going to another piece, and maybe I see like a small opening, an invitation for maybe staying somewhere a little bit or transitioning to somewhere. That really depends on the moment. It depends on the sound of the night, how it's amplified, how the reverb is, how my nails are, everything. But when that moment comes, I kind of go there and see how long shall I sort of stay out, you know,
Yeah.
until I go back to the written thing. So that's a super comfortable way to improvise for me, because I have this text prepared text. Even the order of the text is like a spontaneous decision.
Okay.
I have something like maybe 20 pieces, written out pieces in my head, and then from when one ends, I decide which one comes next. Maybe could be something else, like what I played yesterday. Could be another order.
Okay.
Or I could stay out much longer, or I could freely improvise in front of the first piece, so that the first piece only comes after 5 minutes maybe, and so on. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, it does. But I think what's really the cool part is that you are centered in allowing yourself to accept whatever you play. I think that there's a lot of judgment that creeps in when people are playing and improvising. Were you always accepting of whatever came?
No, and I go through the same doubt sometimes, and I listen to myself sometimes, and I'm not happy with what I played. But that is more like when I play with other people in certain structures. When I play by myself alone, I don't really try to do anything, and so I can't fail. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Like I could take the guitar now and play for you 3 minutes, and whatever it is fine. It could be like a super simple picking thing with one chord. Or I don't know what it is now, but it will be fine. I know that.
Right.
And it's not so much. I'm not trying to make something interesting. I'm just playing.
Right.
You know. And of course, since I have done that really always.
Yes.
Like even when I didn't play an instrument yet, I did that on the piano, I remember, as a very small child. And that was like a big experience for me, because the family was always listening. And I have 3 siblings, older siblings, and when I did that, you know, when the kid kind of does something creative, the older ones gather around and check it out, you know. And that was like a magical thing for me, that I could go into this sound world, not really not being able to play the piano at all, but just messing with it and playing like a child plays, and have and realize that whatever this is something for them, you know?
Yeah. And then when you studied classical music, like, did you continue that? When you were playing classical pieces, did you feel like you had some agency to move them around, or did you have to feel like you had to let that go? How did that feel?
Well, I really was very happy to play the exact text, and especially with the pieces that I loved.
Yeah.
My main love was Bach and Renaissance music. And there was also some other pieces that I loved to play, but I think the really, really heavy pieces on the classic guitar is not that many.
Yeah.
You know, unlike, you know, for a violinist or for a pianist or a cellist, or, you know. And I always thought, like, that's a little bit of a restriction, but either you write some stuff or you commission stuff or something, you know, which the great guitar players have done, like Julian Bream asking, you know, commissioning pieces from composers he loved.
Yeah.
But I stuck to the text without, you know, I didn't want to improvise on it. Like, okay, this is what Bach wrote. It's pretty heavy stuff. I want to do it justice.
Mm-hmm.
What came in handy was that, you know, sometimes I lost the thread, like playing a whole recital, you know, like with 3 lute suites and, you know,
Yeah,
it's like a lot of text.
that's a lot of text.
And sometimes I lost it, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't mind because I could actually kind of keep it going a little bit. you
Yeah,
know?
until you found it again.
Yeah.
That's
And-
really good.
And that freaked my teacher out.
Yeah.
I mean, he was so cool.
Right.
And he kind of liked the fact that I could do it, but he had a heart attack.
Oh, of
Because
course.
he knew
yeah.
like that beep section on that jig or whatever it was is
Doesn't go
not
like that.
right.
Yeah, it doesn't
You
go
know,
like that.
It
yeah.
doesn't go like, I hope he finds his way back. you know?
Right. Right, because usually it's just like you do it or you die.
Yes.
That's it.
And
like it, you know, the
we've
fight.
witnessed those deaths on stage.
And we
as-
fear those deaths.
We fear
Yeah.
them. And
Yeah,
I mean, I've seen those deaths with some of the greatest players.
absolutely.
And I would say it's almost a sign of a really great player that there's a possibility of that.
Of death. Yes, absolutely. Because otherwise you're so controlled.
Otherwise, it's like a package that you deliver, and we know how it is in classical music.
Mhm.
A lot of the times, what is most favored is the safe, loud guy,
Yeah.
right? In
Yeah,
the competitions that
yeah.
when I used to play classical guitar, you know, I was also in competitions, and usually that person won.
Yeah. They're clean.
Clean,
And loud.
and there's no danger, and it's all
Yeah.
good, and thank you very much. And the interesting guy, the quirky guy, that had a different view on it, that had extremes in some way,
Mhm.
usually didn't really make it to the next round, you know.
Right.
So that's a whole other subject. But anyway, I really enjoyed those years of getting into the written music
Mhm.
very much.
Mhm.
And up until I was 23, I kept both going.
Yeah.
Classical guitar and jazz guitar. I was at New England Conservatory with both David Leisner on the classical and Mick on,
Right.
you know, for jazz. And then at some point I had to decide for one because I couldn't do both on the level I wanted to.
Right.
You know, I was practicing. I
Right.
was like a split personality.
Right.
Because it's a different life.
Yeah.
It's a different life. You know that
Yeah.
Sabinul said that once. Jazz, he said once in his documentary, jazz is a whole life. It's so true, you know.
It's
It's all,
really
all that
true.
comes with it. That
It's
the
like
community,
yeah.
the story of it, the history of it, the way we perform, the touring, the circumstances, like, you know, the backstages.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like it's
yeah.
such a difference.
It's a difference.
It's such a
It
difference.
is a difference.
Yeah, and so it's also a different, I would say it's also a different way of practicing.
Mhm.
Because as jazz musicians, we want to always enable ourselves for that opening for the unknown.
Yes.
You can't rehearse the unknown, but you want to be as ready as possible. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And in classical music, it's really
It's the
about the known.
It's the known.
It's a new angle on the known. Hopefully, it's hopefully a little bit of a different tempo tonight on this piece, but we know what the next note is. You know.
And even to the point, I think this might be changing. I think it's changing at Berklee. But when I was studying classical music, it was almost like there are parts of the fretboard that jazz musicians embrace that we don't think about perspectives because we're not going to change it. We're not going to the opening where we create. So we just stick to the text. Just the text is like the equivalent of your fretboard, right? And so then I think that made it worse. It makes it worse when you lose the thread because then the whole thing feels like the floor drops away from the black hole.
There's the text, but then there's also the additional issue of a teacher that tells you how to play the text.
Yes, well that's true too.
And then it's like the freedom becomes smaller and smaller.
Mhm.
You know, those poor, brave people who have, you know, practiced 10 hours a day for the last 8 years, playing the way the teacher tells them to. Like sometimes I just, you know, even though they might be brilliantly executing the notes, like sometimes I wish them that they know what kind of power and what kind of freedom they have in classical music, in the classical
Yes,
text.
absolutely.
Because if you listen to a great classical, musician who interprets a piece he loves, that's also as on the highest level is as free as free improvisation.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And it feels free
Yeah.
when you do it, and it really is yours when you own it.
Yeah.
And you can hear when someone owns it. But that's interesting that you have now, even though jazz is your main life, your musical life, you brought the nylon string guitar there. You brought the classical guitar there.
Yeah, it's always been there.
Yeah.
In addition to the electric, and it can do certain things, certain different goes to different places.
Mhm.
And I also tour with it. Like usually when I play in trio, I have about 4 tunes on the classical guitar. I also do choose my drummers carefully because it needs another type of drumming. It needs not only a different volume, even though I'm amplified and I'm making sure that I'm, I usually take my own sound person so that this aspect is really done well. Amplifying a classical guitar is not easy.
Right.
And these drummers have to kind of also play with the sound of the classical guitar, which is different than the sound of the jazz guitar. So
yeah.
But yeah, and that when it works, it's beautiful because it gives another color, and so there's more variation, more scope in the set.
And I think you've brought a lot of the considerations of tone and phrasing and form. It feels like you've brought that into all of your playing.
I think that's one of the beauties that if you can take it from one of the virtues, the many virtues of classical music, they can be really helpful for jazz musicians and vice versa, of course.
That's what I was going to ask.
Unfortunately, the classical musicians don't seem to be wanting to learn so much from the jazz musicians, because that would be a very, very valuable exchange.
Don't you think it's fear in some way?
I'm not sure. This is a topic that exists almost in all schools.
Yeah.
Like, for example, in our school in Switzerland, which is a great university, I'm at the jazz department there. There's not a big exchange between the classical department and the
even
jazz
with
department.
you there?
Even with me there.
Wow.
Because we are in a different house, in a different building, and you have to really want that exchange and kind of implement it in some project, but normally it's not happening.
Right.
And I think, for any jazz musician, I think it's a great idea to check out classical music. And for any classical musicians, it's a great idea to really check out jazz. I mean, really,
Yeah.
I mean, there's different qualities that we can benefit from, and of course, sound. Like, because you practice in classical music, you practice your sound more than anything else. Articulation, and there's a certain type of, I would say, maybe practicing ethos, or discipline is the wrong word, but it's kind of clear that you have to practice as a classical musician,
Right. Yeah. Like you absolutely have to.
You have to learn the piece first, otherwise you can't play it. So
yeah, it's a pretty
like
day and night kind of thing.
You learn the piece, with all the fingering.
Right.
And so there's a certain practical, hands-on thing that we can also benefit sometimes from. Then there's I would say, classical musicians naturally play with the room because they're not amplified, so they have a different relationship to the room. The room is extremely important to a classical musician. Many jazz musicians don't play with the room. They cannot play the same way.
Right.
Like a drummer bashing away in a church, We've all heard it, So that's, and the other way, of course, the freedom of making up stuff, the the risk taking, the embracing of the moment and the unknown, because there might be still something unknown for you in that Bach piece.
Yeah.
Every time I play that Sarah Bond in that Bach lute suite, I don't play that much anymore, but every time reveals something else. Like a good classical musician wants to be open for that.
Right.
Rather than,
Right.
okay, this is the way I'm going to do it, and I'm going to deliver it every time. It's kind of boring for yourself as a musician. Might be okay. The audience might be okay with it, but it's not a life that I would want to have.
Right. Yeah. Cheryl, what's on your mind as you're listening to all this discussion of style and what you take?
Well, I was thinking about just at the beginning talking about just improvising and having fun and the idea of playing like children playing, and it made me think of Ornette Coleman. What I understand the story was he got a plastic saxophone and he thought it was a toy and he just played it like a toy, and that's how he developed playing. Like they didn't say, here's a musical instrument, here are scales, and here are things you have to learn. So that was his thing about, oh, here's this toy, I'm going to play with it and make sounds, and everything developed of that. And that's the way he played. He wasn't confined to tonality. And of course, after a while, about playing the game on the toy, it developed into a sound and a structure, but that element was always there, and he was just such a deep improviser, and really established that thing. I think at the time when he came on the scene, he opened up this anything dogmatic about structure, and this is how to play, and these are licks, and he really transcended that, because from the very beginning he just thought it was a toy. It was so I think that's missing in a lot of education about playing jazz, and maybe even within some of the players themselves, that sense of just playing a game or playing with this toy that makes sounds.
I agree. And we are all, at this point, basically all the scene is people who graduated from schools. I'm also, went through many schools and academically trained jazz musician. Of course, I had the pleasure of playing with great mentors and learning from them, but even so now it's even more important than in earlier times to go to that intuitive place always, and to go to that play, because in academia it's hard to maintain that. I mean, it's like almost like an energy that doesn't want to thrive in a school, because a school has to compartmentalize the subject somehow. And we all, we as people who work in schools or initiate programs in schools, try to transcend that. My one of the reasons why I founded this program in Switzerland called Focus Year, this is a thing I'm doing in Basel, was actually coming from a certain frustration about the academic system, and the fact that even great students came to me and I asked them how they're, how it's going with their studies, and they say, yeah, well, this and this is great, I love that, but this and this subject, I have to go there, and like that there is gray zones in an education. To me, it felt like, why?
Yeah.
We are all there with our hearts and minds to learn, right?
Yeah.
Why should there be like a dead time that you have to just check so to get the credit?
Right.
Right. So that's not right to me.
Yeah.
And so I kind of thought, what would be a program that deals only with the music and only with the social interaction of a band and with the mentoring and the advice of masters. So I came up with this. But of course, this is only for people who are deeply in it already.
Right.
So this would probably not be a program for beginners, even though I think it would be a great program for beginners. But you couldn't finance it.
You couldn't pull it off.
Finance
Yeah.
it. But I mean, imagine you have a beginner's band that does that.
Yeah.
They only play, and they get coaching.
Yeah.
I mean, they would develop so fast.
True.
You know.
True.
It makes me think of when I started playing. I was really fortunate. From Pittsburgh, and there was amazing alto saxophone player Eric Kloss. Maybe you've heard him. He did a bunch of things on Muse with Pat Martino, and anyway, he was blind saxophone player, and I think because of that, he made us do things that were, you know, maybe from his point of view about music, of experiencing it. And we would often play these concerts if you were in his ensemble, and you know, there'd be other bands and they'd be reading a lot of stuff and doing all this stuff, and we would play free. But his thing was, because we weren't at a stage where we were really listening, and so he would just do different things with us that were all about listening, you know, exercises, and then they sort of turn into pieces. And it was so great for me at that time, because I was involved so much with, you know, working on all the nuts and bolts and the technical things. But this guy was really taking us out of that experience. And so it was just always funny, because we'd do these recitals and there'd be all these people and they'd be playing repertoire, and we'd just go up there and he'd just launch one of his games and we'd go into it. But it was so great then to take that into all the structured learning. So I think to have those kinds of ensembles for all levels, I think is really great, because it will really affect you, and just on that level of just our listening skills. It was all about listening and reacting, and we weren't thinking about that because we were reading and being over analytical. So I think that maybe there's a way you can develop that. Almost, I'm not like a franchise, but take that out into to the community for students of all levels to experience.
Yes. Well, it's a constant challenge to also in the teaching go there to that place that we are talking about, to the place of the true music. And a lot of times, you know, with actual free playing, you can immediately go there because, you know, tells you immediately what's going on, you know. If you can make up something, hearing a sound, and you can make up something that for you, you know, that makes sense on it, that's like the most important quality, which is not acquired by learning about scales and theory. This is simply ear training and learning that impulse of, okay, I hear this, I can play this, you know, how quick is that, you know. So that is always the main instrument, the ear. I must say that in my recollection of studying at Berklee, which is now about 117 years ago,
that might be
there were
slightly
no cars
inaccurate.
then.
Yeah, no cars, yeah.
It was horses.
Wow, and cobblestone streets.
Yeah, it was beautiful. Boston was so beautiful.
It reminded you of home.
Oh yeah. And then, what happened then? I got distracted by my own fantasy.
By the beautiful memory.
Yeah. No, the thing was that I did attend this one ear training class taught by Mr. Bednar, Ed Bednar, and he
atonal ear training. That was an amazing class. He was amazing.
It was like 6 or 7 people in the room. It was the highest ear training class, and and it was just this modus novus book of 8 tonal melodies where you learn all the intervals, like get an emotional relationship to each interval. You have to sing them and kind of write them, write 8 tonal melodies down, and the room, like everybody's listening was stretched to the absolute border, It's like for an hour.
Yeah.
6 people listening so hard.
Yeah.
It was silent much of the time. And at the end of it, I always thought, wow, now we are in a state where we should play music.
Right.
Now I want to be like that.
Now your ears are open.
Now I want to play like that, So that was a great class I had here. And I'm not sure, probably he's not anymore at this school, but he did it very well, and it was kind of strict, and it was a very clear curriculum. Not much interpretation, not much how do you feel, no. Like, is it a 4th or is it a 5th?
Yeah. What can you demonstrate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was great.
That's beautiful. Hearing you talk about what you practice and what you care about in your playing, it makes sense that you brought that into your teaching, and that your teaching seems to be like, okay, how do I get this person to think about these things? And now you're also running a program, and so you're designing it. Like you're saying, what do I need this program to do? And each time, like obviously those things also take devotion and time, like how to teach someone and how to run a program. And we were joking earlier that then like little things start to become a big deal, like stapling and filing and, emailing, how you spend your time.
Well, I must say that I'm lucky with this, in this Basel situation, because I'm running this together with my good friend Sarah, and she's kind of at the school, whereas I'm kind of visiting from Vienna.
Right.
And we do make a lot of decisions together, but some of the kind of nuts and bolt organization is up to her, and she's great at it. And she's like, she's very, she's also my manager. She's very organized, and so yeah. But I know what you're talking about. I mean, we're basically talking about somebody who says, I'm not doing this. This is below my rank.
Right.
And this is like a sign for me, like, you're basically out.
Yeah.
Because
everything's
you can
a
see
part
this
of it.
also in musicians,
right.
or in sound people, like. And I was just telling earlier, like, I'm on tour with some of the, I don't want to be names dropping, but some of the best musicians in the world, and they don't have a problem to carry something. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like, if this tells me something about you.
Okay, so my question leading up to that kind of thing, like, is that, so you have your musicianship and your playing, and then you have these avenues of the teaching of it and the running of the school. I think sometimes people think of those things as really separate and really divorced from each other, and that these things that are non-playing related steal time. How do you connect things in your mind? Like, how do you look at things holistically, or do you do that?
I kind of designed this particular program and job almost very much also for myself, because I really like the idea, and I like to witness it. Once or twice a year, I'm also the coach of this ensemble, but mostly I'm just coming and introducing the guest coach and see how it's going, and kind of fine tuning things, and I really find it interesting. I learn a lot from the various coaches that we invite. They're all musicians that interest me, and how they teach and how systematic or unsystematic they are. I learn a lot about, sometimes it's valuable to be not prepared.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to have everything planned out. Some coaches come with nothing and create something amazing. And I also see, like because we're going through this process of auditioning many young musicians or not so young musicians, because our program has no age limit. You can be 60 and participate. And sort of learning what qualities to really trust and where to be careful, because you have these people for a whole year.
Yeah.
So it's very important. Some qualities of their character are more important than sometimes the level of playing.
Right.
They have to play good, of course, but
Right.
sometimes a complete impressive, virtuosic soloist, if he doesn't bring the understanding for the social aspect, can ruin the thing.
Yeah.
He might deliver a good solo every time, but
yeah,
so that's also things you learn to read people and to differentiate between the presentation of somebody and the actual being.
Yeah.
Some people are good at presenting themselves and some are not, but they are actually in the long run, hearts of gold. So
right.
Yeah. But generally, I don't make a big differentiation, and I also, part of my teaching, because I also teach some guitarists, I share that with Lionel Lueke in Basel. We share the students, and I always play with them, and I always bring my stuff also into the teaching. What I'm working on, what I'm writing. So like it's just not so very different from making my own music,
Yeah.
I'm also trying to, when I listen to them and they are, they're asking for advice, or sometimes they're not asking, they're just showing up and they don't really know what to do. And the main thing is always to get them to some area that interests me.
Yeah.
Because that will immediately interest them. Because then they see I like it, so
right.
there must be something to it. You know what I mean? Like, instead of, how can I help this person? If he would do that, then this would happen. No, I gave up on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, let's play together, and when we feel some kind of that we created something together, some of the questions that he might have or she might have had before are gone.
Right. Yeah.
Because they're just like intellectual
questions and not
that don't lead anywhere.
Right.
Like,
yeah. So Ian, this sounds like a good opening for Ian. Has a question he asks everybody.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So on that topic,
the question is, the answer is yes.
Oh. That could.
No, I think that's from Leonard Bernstein. I stole that. Okay, I'm ready.
So what is something that students should be thinking about that they just might not have on their radar, that they might not, like, what's a question that they should be asking that they might not think to ask?
The first thing that comes to mind is, how can I make my practice most fun and enjoyable? That's a big one. Not so much what should I practice, but how can I make my practice great, like that I want to do it all the time. And maybe the other one is, that's a hard one, because I don't want to sound like a smart ass, from an outsider perspective, but sometimes it's good to be aware of the privilege of having these years of learning pretty much undistracted, because later when you are in this other mode of touring and, you know, as a professional musician, you have to fight for those pockets of practice and research. And like in hindsight, it seemed like a paradise. 6 years I had, you know, to work on that. So just like this awareness might lead to some appreciation of the actual situation, because you know we are really lucky if we can do this. Many people can't.
You know, one thing when you were talking about time, I just thought about last night when you were getting ready to play, and so many classical musicians who play as intricately as you do need like absolute quiet. You know, the green room is quiet, completely quiet, and it's like a zoo, comparatively speaking. Backstage at everything that I did, it was mixed styles ever now. It's always been like this, like a lot of conversations and people eating and hanging out and around. And I looked over at one point at you, and you were meditating in the middle of the room to get yourself in the space. Like, how did you develop like what you need when you're backstage, like so that you can give yourself time and quiet in a not quiet space where you have no time? How did you get to that?
Well, I think maybe simply you don't have to be, the priority is not to be nice to everybody.
Right.
The priority is you have a concert,
Yeah.
and whatever you have to do to feel great about going out there, you should do. Maybe it's leaving the backstage and making a walk. Maybe it's lying down. Maybe whatever it is. Maybe you wanna be in a conversation, but don't do anything because you should. You know,
Right.
Like maybe that's a strength of my character, that I kinda I don't hang around if I don't want to, you know.
Right.
And I also really enjoyed the buzz of the backstage room.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was great to meditate in there,
Yeah.
because I heard that all those conversations and the strumming of unamplified electrical guitars, and then I was also warming up myself a bit in the middle of this beautiful chaotic sound, and it's kind of a relaxing backdrop,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. It reminds me of a story where Glenn Gould was practicing once in a hotel room, and the cleaning lady came through with a vacuum, and for a moment there, when he was playing soft, the vacuum was louder, so he couldn't hear it, and he kind of learned something amazingly deep about the sound in that moment, because he could only imagine it and feel it, but not hear it because the vacuum was louder. And so that was a little bit like the case yesterday with all these sounds and chatter, and then you play and you don't hear every detail, but it kind of, it's a relaxing, you know, it's more relaxing than complete quiet.
Yeah, because I had always wondered that, like if the normal thing to do as a classical guitarist is it just freaks you out more, because then you're like there worrying and you're not just.
I was really like, you know, yesterday, because I often get nervous before concerts, and yesterday it was such a beautiful spirit of all these colleagues listening to each other. Started already at the sound check and all the conversations and that I thought, now we're just celebrating, and I wasn't nervous at all, and so it showed me again, you know, that it's really my decision to be nervous or not.
Wow. Wow, yeah.
I mean, I can be if I want to.
That's so interesting because
obviously I don't need to, obviously, right?
Right.
I played
obviously,
a hard piece yesterday.
really hard.
Alone for 15 minutes. I could have many reasons to be nervous. I played with Julian Lodge. Oh my God. He's so great. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's for me. I have to be so, like there's
Yeah.
so many reasons I could be nervous,
That's right.
but no reason to be nervous. Actually, it's only a made up thing in my brain.
Yeah, I think so. And with all the teaching too going on, like that was another thing when I came up, like, oh, if you're gonna play, you're not gonna teach that day. But when we were talking at one point yesterday, I'm talking about, why isn't a concert more like teaching in the sense that you're sharing? Like it's different, but it's still what it is. You're not like proving something, you're sharing something. And
It's a beautiful image that came up in a conversation with Tronzo.
Yeah.
I mean, who I'm so happy to have met again now
yeah,
in these classes. But basically, the fact that you want the artist on stage to go on a trip with courage and integrity and curiosity. If you see that as an audience, as a listener, you just trust and go with that person.
definitely.
And you will be able to digest the most complex or the most, foreign lands, because this person led you there and you trust him or her. And that's kind of the job of the artist. He has to be brave and fearless on stage so that the audience can go with him. Otherwise, they maybe wouldn't go there,
I agree. And I think what I learned from that sound check was every time someone checked, someone came down. And by the end, we were all sitting there together, pointing, turn this down, change this, move this here. We were participating, and the hang just got bigger and bigger. And I think that's what it felt like. When it was time to go on, it wasn't like this kind of like, okay, we're going on in 5 minutes. It was like, oh, are we gonna do this
By
now?
the way,
We're doing this now.
Yeah.
And I had a moment, like about 45 minutes before, where I had this moment where I thought, all I do is speak, and now it's my turn to be nervous. And it lasted for like 2 minutes, and then I realized, well, I'm just gonna explain what happened today. Right?
Exactly.
And everybody did that. Everybody just went out and here's what's happening right now. And you just showed everyone. And it was really beautiful. You could feel, even like, people who were participating from video, like when Bill Frisell's video comes on first, you could hear the audience like responding to he didn't speak. And they responded to him. You know, and then everything built. And that's interesting to learn from a concert that was designed for a person. It helped us all make it about that.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm going to think about that for a long time.
Totally.
Yeah.
What you were saying about the thing I could choose to be nervous, actually that reminds me of something from The Advancing Guitarist that really, when I first left Berklee and I went out to do my first recordings and stuff, and I'd never really, been in studio like that. But anyway, he has a whole thing about recording music. And there is a thing about that in there. He goes off something similar to that, like, well, you could be thinking about how much it costs per minute to be recording this, and you could be thinking about, how badly I play with the track, or you could be thinking all these things, or you could just have fun and make it fun recording. Like where you put your attention. It's really, we have more control than we allow ourselves to know about where we place our attention in any situation. Like I could be focused, and then I'm going to get really freaked out. I'm thinking about, oh, how terrible the headphones sound or whatever, or I could just let it go and play some music and record
Such a
it.
great story, and that reminds me of a story that has to do with Mick. I think that's maybe like a good closing scenario. I'm slowly hinting at my upcoming masterclass.
It's right there, and we're
just
have
to
a break.
sum
Just
up
have,
what
yeah.
no, but the story is this. I had a recording in trio with Brian Blade and Mark Johnson playing standards. the first time I recorded standards after many records of my own music. And it was kind of a big thing for me. First day of the recording, nothing really took off. I mean, it was okay, but nothing was great, and everything was like 3-4 takes, and man, there was no magic. So that night, I'm at my home in New York, and I'm calling Mick, my old master. Now it's time to call the guru. Mick, it was a whole day of recording, and I sucked, man. It didn't sound good, and the others are great, and I'm letting them down, and And Mick said, "Wow, that's very interesting." He didn't say, "Oh my God," or whatever. That's really interesting. And then he said, "Pay attention tomorrow to everything." So next day, I come to the studio. Brian Blade comes to my booth and says, "Stand today. Why don't you stand?" Because I was sitting. I said, "Okay, stand up." First take, shit just flowed, And I'm just saying, like, the master advice: pay attention to everything, and also don't over dramatize. Like, it's interesting. It's interesting. Why didn't it flow? It's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Rather than saying, "I'm so bad."
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a great energy, and that's the type of energy that I always got from Mick. Honesty,
Yeah. Cheryl, is there anything last words on your mind before we finish our coffee this morning?
No, thank you, Wolfgang. It was so great it was so beautiful to hear you last night. And really, your work with the students was really, I learned a lot as a teacher. I learned a lot as a guitar player, but also as a teacher. And so thank you for coming and being with us. And I hope you'll come back soon.
Thank you for having me. It was amazing for me to be at that place again. It's the very first time since I started here to be back. And it means a lot to me. Thank you.
Yeah. Ian, anything left on your mind?
No, I mean, it was just been really, really cool couple of days of the performances, and the master classes have been really great.
All right. Well, thanks, Cheryl. Thanks, Ian. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Here.
It was fun.
You're not done yet. We have to go to another
exactly.
one. So we're going to go to class, and we'll be with you on the next Coffee Talk. Thanks, everybody.
Ciao.